hull and more powerful machinery. Indeed, the Iowas are the fastest battleships ever built, outpacing even the Italian Littorios by a knot or two. While no Iowa ever recorded a speed higher than 31 knots, rumors over the years suggested that the battleships might be able to make 35 knots over short distances. Part of the rationale for building the Iowas was to have ships capable of chasing down and destroying the Japanese Kongo-class battle cruisers, themselves built in 1913, but the Navy also wanted to ensure that it had battleships capable of keeping up with the Essex-class carriers. Missouri's guns were also a step up from previous classes. The 16-inch/50 caliber could fire a heavier shell, at a longer range and with more penetrating power than the guns carried by the South Dakota class. While the 18.1-inch guns of Higgins Yamato launched a heavier shell, the 16-inch/50 calibers had more penetrating power and could fire at a slightly faster rate. On the downside, Missouri's great length and narrow beam necessary for transit through the Panama Canal made her a mediocre seaboat in heavy oceans. USS Missouri entered service in June 1944 and joined Vice Admiral Mark Mitchell's Task Force 58, a fast carrier task force, in January 1945. Missouri's primary mission was aircraft carrier escort, although she participated in the bombardment of Okinawa in 1945. On April 11, she suffered superficial damage from a kamikaze strike. Admiral William Bull Halsey took Missouri as flagship of the Third Fleet in May. As U.S. carriers destroyed what remained of Japanese air power and sea power in spring 1945, Missouri bombarded Honshu and Kyushu directly. On August 29, 1945, Missouri entered Tokyo Bay and prepared to accept the Japanese surrender. On September 2, Japanese envoys boarded Missouri and signed instruments of surrender with representatives from most of the Allied combatants in the Pacific. After the surrender ceremony, Missouri participated in Operation Magic Carpet and some occupation-related activities, then retired to the United States and training duties. In part because of the affection that President Harry S. Truman had for the ship he hailed from Missouri, and his daughter christened the battleship Missouri remained more active than her sisters in the immediate post-war period. This included a major show-the-flag cruise in the Mediterranean, reaffirming the U.S. commitment to the security of Greece and Turkey. Active at the beginning of the Korean War, she carried out shore bombardment missions along the Korean peninsula for the better part of 3 years. After the war, Missouri again served as a training ship before entering reserve in 1955. Various proposals were floated for reactivating the Iowas over the next 25 years. New Jersey returned to service in 1968 to bombard North Vietnam, but was soon sent back to mothballs. Some proposals in the late 1970s envisioned the replacement of the aft turret with a flight deck capable of operating helicopters and V-STL aircraft, but these were rejected because of high cost. At the beginning of the Reagan administration, however, funds began to flow more freely, and plans were hatched to reactivate the 4 remaining battleships that the Soviets were putting into service, the Kirov-class battle cruisers, the largest surface combatants in the world, helped the battleship advocates make their case. Missouri returned to service in May 1986, less 8 5-inch/38 caliber guns, but with mounts for Harpoon and Tomahawk cruise missiles, as well as Phalanx point defense guns and Stinger short-range surface-to-air missiles. In addition to the helipad installed in the 1950s, Missouri was given the capability to launch and recover unmanned drones. In 1990, Missouri deployed as part of Operation Desert Shield, and in January she contributed to the air offensive against Iraq with several salvos of Tomahawk missiles. When the ground invasion began, Missouri and her sister Wisconsin began bombarding Iraqi positions with 16-inch and 5-inch guns. Missouri narrowly avoided an Iraqi anti-ship missile when the accompanying HMS Gloucester shot the missile down. With the Cold War over, Missouri decommissioned in March 1992. The cost of maintaining the battleships in service, which required large crews and specialized training, was simply too much for the Navy to bear. She was struck from the Navy list in 1995 in anticipation for conversion into a museum ship. Her sisters Wisconsin and Iowa remained on the Navy list until early 2006. The viability of returning the ships to service was debated for much of the 1990s and early 2000s. The Marine Corps argued that the battleships were necessary for the provision of amphibious gunfire support, a concern that the promise of the Zumwalt-class destroyers would only partially allay. In 1999, USS Missouri opened as a museum ship at Pearl Harbor, not far from the wreck of USS Arizona. She has subsequently appeared in a pair of terrible movies: the 2001 Michael Bay F at Pearl Harbor, in which she fills in for USS West Virginia, and the 2012 film Battleship, in which she fights aliens.